Hi, this is Stephen Barrow from Art Valley Community College. This is for CSIT 256, Computer Architecture and Assembly Language. And this is for Irvine Chapter 5. And what I want to do is sort of give a brief peek into the Irvine Library. Well, one thing in Canvas, which is what I'm viewing here, is there's this library addendum. And what this is sort of a brief overview of what is in the book. So the book has 43 procedures, and for each procedure it lists the documentation and it gives a sample for each one. Think of this as being like a quick reference guide, and all it does is list a number of the procedures and then refers to what they need in terms of input, in terms of the parameters and what they return. What is not organized yet. I did already a number of videos on specific topics using the stack, write deck, and write string, and write car. Here's a 3-part demo on loading an array and then writing a procedure. Here's a demo on using random range to randomly generate values, and here's a demo on read string. But as sort of an overview, what I do want to mention is that, well, let's scroll to dump regs. So dump regs, like when we called it, it just did a register dump. So the input, there was nothing we had to do before we did call dump regs. And if you're looking at the output and saying, well, wait a minute, there's output, why does it say none? We're referring to output meaning the procedure returning data to whatever called it. So yeah, the display, the register dump is on the screen, but it doesn't return anything to what called it. So what I want to do, it may not be quick, but what I want to do is take, for chapter 3, there is a simple little overview, and what I want to do is modify that by adding a couple of things. So demo for Stelling's chapter 3, revised for chapter 5. So the modification, this is 611. Okay, now that prior demo had hard-coded in it that the apples sold were 8 and the oranges sold were 6. And so what I want to do is initially have them as being uninitialized, and I want to prompt the user for the values. So just as a like pseudocode, let me enter here prompt user for apples sold. We prompt user for orange sold. Now the calculation of the total I already have here. That's what we did previously. So we loaded the variable EAX, added it to EAX, took that and moved it in the total sold. But instead of doing this dump regs, then what I'll do is I'll say display, let me just for right now just say display values. Okay, I'm going to periodically pause the video and then explain what I filled in. Here's the first pause. Changed my mind in terms of a little thing. I'm not doing the inputs yet, so I put back what the values were, 6 and 8. But what I added were strings for when I do prompt a user, what the prompts to the user will be, and strings for when I do display the data, what labels, these are going to be text, is going to go on the screen in front of the data itself. The latter part here, so after the total is calculated, now this is where the author's routines have, depending on what it is, different expected registers to load. So write string, now that was actually, we did that in Hello World, requires EDX to have the offset of the string to display. And so this is displaying here that apple sold label, which is going to say number of apples sold. We'll load into EAX the apples sold. So what write_int requires is that EAX have the value that's being displayed. And so these lines here will display the string apples sold, and then it'll display what the value is, which I put back to the original set of values. Later, when we prompt the user, it'll be what the user entered. Same process here for orange sold. Same process here for total sold. So just by adding these outputs, whoops. So coming back to here, so this call write string, this call write string here, that's what displays apples sold. This call write_int here, that's what displays the 6. This call write string here, that's what displays oranges sold. This call write_int here, that's what displays the 8. This call write string here, that displays the total fruit sold. And this call write_int here, that is what displays the total fruit, the value of the 14. Okay, so, and I just very quickly put those in just for the output. And so this is how you would use the author's routines, which is load the correct parameters and then call the routine that will carry out an action. What I want to do now is I'll modify the program. So let's put this back as uninitialized for the apple sold, uninitialized for the orange sold. And so now the prompting the user for the right sold, I'm going to load into EDX the offset of, that'll be this prompt here, apple sold prompt. And then call write string. And that'll display onto the screen what the user is typing in. I'm going to then call read_int. Now, read_int is for getting a assigned integer, assigned 32-bit number from the user. The result is left in EAX. So EAX will have the value from the user. Once we get in EAX the value from the user, we can then stick that into memory. So move the apple sold what is in EAX. So let me just pause and fill in some comments. Okay, so I just added some comments to what I had typed in, but all of that there, that is taking care of the apple sold. Let me replicate what I did for the apple sold for the oranges sold. And one thing is, if I just want to be lazy about it, then what I can do is then a matter of changing apple to orange. And if you're wondering, hey, isn't there a better way to do this? Yes, we'll see that in Chapter 8. So in Chapter 8, we'll have a generic prompt procedure that we're going to write that will get the value from the user. Oops, sorry. That will get the value from, well, in other words, we would load parameters for the string to display, and then we would load parameters with what would receive the data, and then we'll call it. So we'll see a better way. Right now, it's duplicate code in a sense, not much changes, but when we get to Chapter 8 and revisit procedures, we'll see how we can make this better. Now, I'm talking and yapping. I'm coding and talking. It did compile. Oh, wow. And so now if I run it, and by the way, when you're testing, for the inputs, you shouldn't use the same value for both. Because if I did 1 and 1 for the apple sold and the oranges sold, how do I know if the formula is wrong and it's just using the wrong variable? So I just want to be careful about that. So let me just use different variables than what we had with initially. So if I do 3 and 7, and now it's echoing back, you entered 3, you entered 7, here's the total fruit sold. For anyone who's doubting what I'm doing, let me do this again. So, oh, sorry. What I should have pointed out before are the pluses. The pluses here because it's signed. So let me run it again, but with a negative number for one of these. So suppose I did sell 6 apples, but suppose 3 oranges were returned. Okay, so we have our apples sold as 6, oranges sold as -4, total fruit sold is 2, and then just one more run just to let's make sure it comes out to be negative, -6, and so our total fruit sold is -4. Here I'm using the returning of a fruit as being a negative value. Okay, so I went way too quick showing a couple of things, but the big thing is for the author's routines, there are certain registers we have to load before we call them, or for the author's routines, we call it and then we have to take the value that's in the register and then use it. So now let's look at both the write string and the readent in the document that I have. So the write string, input an EDX with the offset of an null terminated string, output none. And what it does, it writes a null terminated string to the output. And the other one was read int. So if I go alphabetic, shouldn't be that bad. No, it's not alphabetic. Hey, I messed up. Okay. Input none. So we didn't have to do anything beforehand. And if you notice, there's nothing done before the readent, but output EAX has the signed number entered by the user. Okay. So this is, in essence, the overview of the Irvine library. And what will happen is these other videos that are up here in Canvas will focus on other aspects of the library. That's good enough, I think.